Once again, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining for another session of Azure Power Lunch. And we are going to talk today about SignalR, and we're going to talk about in the context of Azure Functions. First of all, SignalR is not something new. I mean, this thing has been there as a part of ASP.NET for a very, very long time. And it has been there, in different uh, shapes and forms. So it is being used. But why we are talking about it, with this kind of a new focus, is because as we are, building newer and newer application, real time updates to the UI or real-time tracking or things like that are becoming like much more common. And this thing allows you to do it kind of a really, really easy way. So first of all, just want to mention something here. You see here in-app notification and mobile devices. Please note that this is not a substitution or replacement for mobile app notification. This is an entirely different technology. Yes, it may be doing some things similar, but it's an entirely different technology which relies on things like WebSockets or long polling, things like that. Um, it and it's does not replace mobile notification, and it is not limited to mobile devices. That's the good thing about it. So doesn't matter what type of device you have, as long as you have a browser or any app that can tie into um, the events from um, Azure SignalR, then it can work with a SignalR application. Okay, so quickly moving forward, these are some of the scenarios. And anyways, I will share this slide deck. And by the way, this is not my slide deck. I borrowed it from one of the CSAs. So, David, so that's from one of the CSAs. So that's his slide deck. And I'm just kind of sharing some of the slides from there. Okay, so moving forward, first of all, what is SignalR? Just it's allow you to do kind of server to client communications. Um, it used to be a very proprietary technology, only used within Microsoft application. It came with ASP.NET, but now, and then it evolved. It started using protocols like WebSockets, open protocol like server sent events and things like that. And it became really, really nimble and flexible in a sense that instead of, depending on what type of, if it's a modern browser, it will be use a modern protocol. If it's a legacy application, then it will fall back to things like long polling and things like that. So use the best uh, transport um, to suit the client. Second thing is a concept calls hubs. If you are, so you can use SignalR in two ways. And I mean, you don't have to use Azure SignalR, and I will come to that. You can just use it in ASP.NET. And the reason is you should have a very good reason to do that, because in that case, you're managing the infrastructure, the everything. But if you really want to do that, you will have to know what are hubs. Uh, Basically, those are kind of think of it the server side of SignalR, which kind of sends events and do all that, and they kind of serve as a pipeline between server and client. So the point is, with that, if you are just using SignalR, ASP.NET SignalR, of course, you have to manage the infrastructure and all that, manage connections. Um, that's where Azure SignalR service comes into picture. Once again, it's a managed service provided by Azure. The goal of this service is simply um, uh, take all the infrastructure needs from you. So what you are doing is um, don't have to worry about deploying any servers and things like that. You don't have to worry about how you do high availability. So in a single region, it provides some behind the scene. It kind of manages your infrastructure. Of course, you can do cross-region deployment and all, and we'll talk about it towards the end if we had time. But in the end, it's a PaaS service, okay? And you can easily configure things like HA and high availability, fault tolerance, and things like that. And then it has very nice integration with other Azure services like functions and things like that, and Event Grid, where it allows you to kind of um, do entire thing in a serverless fashion. Okay, so that's one of the key advantage why you want to use Azure SignalR Service. So SignalR Service, as I said, is an ASP.NET. I mean, it's not a new service. It's almost like 10 years old. But Azure SignalR um, is one of those, the PaaS platform which provides you that capability of, using SignalR as a service. Um, So this is kind of a high level diagram. Once again, this shows you if you are doing self-hosted SignalR, I mean, of course, you can host that service in a web app, but you still are hosting that service. So you are or you can host it on your own servers as well, in VMs as well. But as we move to the right-hand side, this is your managed SignalR. That's where you are using Azure SignalR managed service, and the clients are connecting to it. And you may be using some sort of app service for hubs and things like that, but major part of that will be hosted in Azure SignalR Service. Okay, this is kind of a get a brief idea how clients connect to it. So let's say that you have a client, um, and once again, I'm going to use the example of a chat service. You have different clients which are connected to a chat service. It can be a voting application, it can be a live dashboard, but just for the sake of simplicity, let's think of it that it's a chat service. A client comes in, they will try to connect to the chat service through a URL. They will be authenticated. On the other hand, what will happen at chat services, it will authenticate it, connect to the Azure SignalR, get a token, send the redirect back to the client, and then the client will connect to SignalR service, and at that point, it is ready to receive notifications. So basically, ready to receive the real-time notifications. So as other people start signing in the chat service, they can all start communicating with each other. So that's the model. That's how authentication in SignalR works. So and we will take a look at it once we go to an application. So, any questions so far? Okay, so this is kind of a model where Azure Function and Azure Signal are kind of working together. Think of it: you have Azure Cosmos DB. It is the data is changing based on the change feed. You know that Azure Cosmos DB can now trigger Azure functions through its triggers. So it triggers Azure function, and Azure function in return is connecting to a SignalR service. So think of it a practical scenario like you have this database of products that's updating based on change in the inventory, and there are some system that need live feed. And by the way, just keep in mind this is for mostly for interact. I mean, this is for you should use it for interactive scenario. Okay, where if somebody is sitting in a browser, a desktop app, a mobile app, or it's for the gaming scenario where you need visual interactive information to act upon. Okay, this is not a replacement or anyhow compete with Event Hub or anything, because those things are more for the scenario where you are kind of doing real-time processing of data and doing certain actions automatically, but you don't mean you may or may not have manual interaction. This is specifically for interactive scenario. Okay. So in any case, so basically it will raise an event, and that's how it will take place. So this is once again, that's how kind of a message flow works. So let's quickly move on. Um, you can scale out multiple app servers. So this is where you have multiple hubs. So this is one of the scale out. So let's, what we're gonna do is we're gonna quickly go to a demo. So while we're going to a demo, any questions? Okay, so let's quickly see how we can create a SignalR service. Okay, so there is nothing much to it. You have to select a resource group. You have to give it a name. Once again, keep in mind that the name of your service has to be globally unique. Because this is a service which is spread across globe. So I mean, so this global name. So that name has to be unique. Second thing is pricing tier. I assume that if you are just evaluating, free tier is more than sufficient. Otherwise, you can use standard tier. The third is unit count. You cannot do unit count with free, of course, but you can start with um, standard, and then it will. And by the way, each unit, as far as I know, can maintain 100,000 connections. So just give you an idea, like how if you have like, let's say you have like 1 million users that you expect to connect, you can have like 10 units. This is very important. If you are planning to do functions, you want to select serverless. And it's explained here as well. So look at these service mode FAQs. It is the way it behaves, it kind of maintains the connection. That's why it is important to realize what service mode you will have to select. It can be default, it can be serverless, but if you are planning to use this thing with functions, so for example, you have functions through which you are going to be communicating with SignalR, you may want to select, you definitely want to select a serverless mode. Otherwise, a default mode is okay. Classic mode is what is kind of to maintain capability with classic application, which was written, years back using ASP.NET SignalR. Okay, so once you create it, you will get your SignalR service. So what we're gonna do is we already have a SignalR service, so we're gonna take a look at it. So this is and as I mentioned, these are some settings. So that's where, and you can change the mode later on as well. Okay. Um, one other thing, scale. So you can change the scale, and it takes some time to change the scale. So you have to keep in mind. Um, so with that, that's kind of at a high level, and then you have the keys. With the keys, you can connect to. It's very similar to like storage account keys. So you have a connection string, and you have then you have the keys for that particular system. Okay. So let's quickly go to our sample application. So what I have done is I have created a very simple app. I'm using Azure Functions, and whenever you do Azure Functions, and in this you have to do definitely have to do two methods. One is the negotiate, which method is basically to create the connection to the SignalR to authenticate. Because what will happen is SignalR is gonna call this method to authenticate. So basically it will have, I mean, it will have to authenticate. So that it will call that method to get, for token authentication. And then the second one is the messaging method, where basically what you're doing is you are just you just uh, you're just adding um, whatever the input that is coming from outside. That's all. You're just returning the message to um, everyone who is connected to that particular uh, particular chat. Okay. So with that, let me um, just. So what I have done is I have deployed this a Node.js application. I have deployed it here, and as you can see, these two functions are. Okay, I think there is something. Let me refresh it. So these two, HTTP triggers, both are HTTP triggers. I mean, this is the function that we just saw. So what I'm going to do is in this particular sample, I mean, I'm just using an Azure, um, a sample from GitHub. These are very nice samples that are available. And I'm just going to call this here. And what it asks you, asks you about the URL of the of your function app, because that's how it's gonna communicate to it. So basically, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to my function app, and I am gonna go to this one and just get the URL. Should have gotten the URL. Yeah, here it is. So this is the URL. Let me just copy it here. It is not the entire URL. It is just till websites.net. With that, you have one. So now I can type message, and let's say I just type a test message. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna. So if somebody else wanna join in the fun, first of all, I don't know how you can chat here. Let me do this. Let me post this URL in the chat window. Give me 1 second, and then everybody can try to connect to it, and we can go from there. So in the meantime, any questions, folks?
Hey, Navid, I know you're going to cover use cases to some extent. I have seen this is used for a lot of IoT applications, especially for streaming real-time data, um, and obviously the chat that you are showing. Are there any other use cases that are more prevalent?
Gaming. Gaming is a
Gaming?
big, yes,
Okay.
gaming is a big, and what we call is, like joint editing. So for example, I think as far as I know, they're, in Visual Studio Code, where they are remote debugging, I think it is using um, uh, SignalR behind the scene.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yes.
okay. That's a good
So
information.
yes, so that's because I remember I mean, it was one of the sessions in you know, I think Ready or something, where what's his name? Scott Hanselman. He
Oh, okay.
mentioned that it is basically it is being used behind the scene. It is using
Mhm.
this thing. So I'm trying to find a way.
Yeah, you
Um,
need to open the Teams window. There will be two windows. You can choose the first one in
oh,
desktop, and then you can paste. Yeah, there you go.
okay. So there is this window. Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
there you find the chat.
Let me just paste this here.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you can try and let me paste the URL as well. Let me go here and copy the URL, and we can go in. So I'm going to, and this is the URL that you will have to use. Once again, let me go back here. And this is the, so now if I go back to my, let's see if you can connect to it and see what happens. Yeah. So, I mean, you see that. So I know this is not much to it, but look how little the code we had to do. I mean, if we come here in this particular JavaScript app, Node.js app, I mean, there is barely like 10 lines of code. And by the way, the connection string information is in local setting.json. So that's where, you can use connection string information to connect to it. So the point is, there is, with very little coding and effort, you can create very kind of a sophisticated application. And in terms of use cases, I think this is a broader um, broader list of use cases. So of course, live dashboard is one of the largest uses in-app notification, but on the right-hand side, real-time location-based tracking. I mean, that's something. So, a device is emitting this information where your GPS are, and somebody is looking at it, and you know, uh, and you can update their map based on notifications coming, and SignalR is sending the real-time data to the app so you can see it. And co-authoring, as I said, this is one of the big thing. And as far as I know, Visual Studio, this remote debugging, it uses SignalR behind the scenes. So that's a big use case. You know. Any other questions? And by the way, this is kind of a more detailed scenario of all the different one, like auction and things like that. So that's, and I saw a very good example, and I was like trying to kind of find it and do it. You know, that was using Cosmos DB's notification through, that's basically, actually, it was exactly simulating this UI where you get the notification through functions, and then you send it and you update a real-time dashboard, just like stock tickers, So that was, I think, was a very nice UI. Sorry, I wanted to have it, but unfortunately couldn't make it work. So, but in any case, these are some of the scenarios that are possible with um, SignalR. So, and once again, I know this is not something new, and or it's kind of it has been it's in GA for some time, but I wanted to bring it up because I came across a few apps which has very nice kind of real-time dashboarding on that. So that kind of give an idea that we have a technology available that can do exactly the same thing, so without much work. Oh, by the way, I'm sure if you search for event grid uh, viewer, so there is an event grid viewer. That is a very nice application, which basically what allows you to do is you can tie it. to your event grid. And as you are posting events to the event grid, it shows you what events are coming. So basically, in that case, your event grid is sending events, and they are going, um, and you are using SignalR to take those events and then send those events to, to a webhook, and that's how kind of you are doing this stuff. So it's once again, it's a nice application. Um, I will try to post the link, add the link to that in the presentation as well. Okay. Okay, folks. So any other questions, comments?
So Navid, this is Veera. Quick question.
Maybe.
So when you scale up the SignalR service, would that also automatically scale the backplane?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
You've got a question in the chat. Dana's asking, what's the sample code you used? Was this the easy
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, man. It's here. Its sample code is. Let me just go back to this. It's here. Azure samples. This one. So basically, you just need to use this one, and then it should take you. Oh, come on. I will post it in the deck, man. I think it's one of the. You can search for it. Yeah, here it is. So I'm just gonna paste it in the chat window. Okay. Any other questions? We are right on time. Okay, folks. So if there are no questions, thank you for joining, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. Please stay healthy and stay safe. This is kind of very strange time, so hopefully see everyone in another session next week.
Thank you for the presentation, Navid.
Thank you.
Navid, very helpful. Thank you.